Go ahead, walk away. That was the challenge, the venomous dare from my wealthy husband, Derek. He tossed his crystal tumbler, full of a Macallan that cost more than my first car, and sneered, "You wouldn't survive a week without me, Olivia." We were 23 floors up, in our Manhattan penthouse, the kind of place you see only in movies set in the financial district. The California king bed, the floor-to-ceiling windows looking down on the yellow cabs running their late-night routes, all of it his. He straightened his custom-made silk Hermes tie, waiting for the tears, the begging, the standard trophy wife meltdown. "Without my money, my connections, my protection, you'd be nobody again," he spat, his voice controlled, like he was delivering a quarterly earnings report, not a fatal blow to his marriage. Just another pretty face waiting tables or answering phones. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I reached into my classic Chanel flat bag, the one he'd gifted me last Christmas without even looking up. I pulled out my keys, the electronic fob for the penthouse, the key to the Range Rover, the one with the custom Connecticut plates. I lined them up on the cold, gray granite counter, each one clicking like a small metallic bullet. "You're right, Derek," I said, my voice steady, no tremble. "Let's find out." The color drained from his face. He looked like he'd just gotten a margin call. I walked toward the door, leaving everything he'd bought me behind. The silk robe, the diamonds, the whole gilded cage. That was 3 hours ago. Now, I was posted up in the swanky, old-school lobby of the Ritz-Carlton Midtown, watching the security feed on my phone. Another thing Derek never knew. I had a backdoor view of his entire empire, or at least the kitchen cameras. He was pacing, picking up the keys, setting them down, calling George, his business partner, maybe his dad, Robert, definitely not the NYPD, because what would he tell a cop? My wife ditched me and left her keys. A concierge glided over, giving me a gentle, discreet smile. "Miss Hawthorne, your suite is ready." My maiden name felt like armor. It was mine, the one thing Derek couldn't buy, sell, or trade. I paid with my own cash, 6 figures, accumulated from what he'd laughed off as my cute little hobby of day trading. He told everyone I played with stocks like other wives played tennis at the Greenwich Country Club. He had no idea I'd flipped his initial $10,000 allowance into enough capital to keep me afloat for years. My phone blew up, 17 missed calls. I deleted his contact, watching his name dissolve into a useless string of digits. The first voicemail, when I accidentally hit play, "Olivia, this is ridiculous. Come home. We'll talk about whatever upset you." His voice was that controlled monotone, the one he used when he was trying to handle a volatile, multi-million-dollar investment. By the 5th message, the control was cracking. "You can't just leave. Half of everything is in both our names. You need my signature too." I trashed every single one. The morning felt like a different lifetime. I'd woken up alone in the penthouse as usual. Derek had been asleep in his study, surrounded by monitors showing after-hours trading in Tokyo. I stood at our floor-to-ceiling windows, 23 floors up, watching the city below me, a concrete jungle about to get a whole lot more interesting. Today was our anniversary. He hadn't mentioned it once. The only thing on the marble counter was an invitation to a charity lunch, another command performance. I went to his study, looking for insurance documents, but I knocked something over. A little silver voice recorder, the kind he used for important thoughts. It clattered onto the marble, hitting the play button. His voice filled the room, mid-conversation. "She asked to see our investment statements yesterday." He chuckled, a dry, cruel sound. "I told her they were too complicated, lots of numbers. He actually believed me, George. I could get her to sign over her kidneys and she'd just ask what pen to use." My hands were rock steady as I picked it up. Last Tuesday, the day I'd brought him his favorite sushi lunch. The recording kept going. "That's why this type is perfect. Pretty enough for photos, dumb enough to control, grateful enough to stay quiet. My father taught me well, marry beauty, rent intelligence." I put the recorder back, angled exactly how he'd left it. Then I found the insurance papers. And something else, a folder marked prenuptial amendments dated last month, forfeit of assets if I left without just cause. Notarized with my signature, forged but done by a pro. Surrounded by the evidence of his success and my planned insignificance, something crystallized. This wasn't just a bad marriage. This was a hostile takeover. I was an investment, and he was already planning my depreciation. The Ritz suite was small, but the possibility in it was infinite. Robert, Derek's father, called next. I let it ring. He'd introduced me as Derek's wife. Pretty thing, isn't she? Like a watch or a trophy. Then came the text from Alice, the secretary who'd poured my tea at every family gathering. Heard you left. Room 1247 when you're ready to talk. I have 40 years of information you need. I smiled. The first real smile in months. Derek had said I wouldn't last a week without him. But he'd never wondered why his secretary knew my maiden name. The keys I'd left on the counter weren't surrender. They were a declaration of war. Listen up. This is the cold, hard truth. If you scroll past this right now without hitting subscribe, you're basically telling yourself you're comfortable being played. You're saying, yeah, I'm okay being just another dumb Mark. Derek underestimated Olivia's intelligence, and you're about to make the same mistake with this story. Don't be a sheep. Hit that subscribe button and get your protection plan now. Or if you're too chicken, leave a comment and tell everyone why you're willing to stay asleep at the wheel and miss the real power play. 3 weeks had passed. Today was our actual anniversary. I'd agreed to one dinner, a civilized discussion about logistics. But when I was getting my hair done at a high-end salon on Fifth Avenue, a text came in. Slight change. George and Sophia joining us. Need to discuss the Singapore deal. Our anniversary had become a business meeting. I typed back, perfect. A second text arrived. Actually, father insists we come to the Westchester estate. He's having something catered. 8:00 p.m. The cab had to reroute up the I-95 corridor, trading the flashing lights of Midtown for the dark, winding roads of old money New York. Robert's estate sprawled across 12 acres of manicured old-school perfection. This wasn't dinner, it was an ambush disguised as an anniversary. Sophia, George's wife, a woman younger than me but with the same tired eyes, answered the door. Her smile held that exhausted recognition I'd seen in my own reflection. The foyer opened into the main sitting room. Derek was holding court, a crystal tumbler, his third by the color of his cheeks, in hand. He glanced at me, taking in the $8,000 dress, the sleek hair, the whole look he'd curated, and turned back to his conversation without an ounce of acknowledgement. Robert boomed in from his study. The lovely Olivia. Though I hear you're being not so lovely lately. The separation nonsense? Bad for business, you understand. He smelled of bourbon and imported cigars. Alice, the secretary, appeared with a tray of champagne. Her eyes met mine. As she handed me a glass, her fingers brushed mine. Some anniversaries, she whispered, barely audible, are about endings, not beginnings. The dining room was set for 12. Derek started his performance somewhere between the soup and the sea bass. Funny story about how Olivia and I met, he announced, basking in the practiced attention of the room. She was at the Milken conference completely lost, wandered into a derivatives panel thinking it was about art derivatives. She asked if hedge funds were about landscaping, literally thought we were discussing garden hedges. The story was pure fiction. I had been there, presenting my grad thesis on market manipulation in emerging economies, but that truth didn't fit his narrative of rescuing a beautiful fool. Thank God for lost puppies, George added, raising his glass. They make the best pets. Sophia's hand found mine under the table. A quick, comforting squeeze. Her pity felt worse than the insults. I excused myself. Powder room, I murmured, though everyone knew women didn't powder anything anymore. Robert's study door was partially open. His computer screen glowed, forgotten. I slipped inside. I didn't touch anything, just memorized. The desk layout, the wall safe behind a god-awful reproduction of a Monet, and the password, written on a yellow post-it stuck to the monitor. Robert 1936. His birth year and his favorite Shakespeare character. Rookie mistake. These high rollers thought they were so clever, so bulletproof. When I returned, George was delivering the coup de grace, drunk enough to be cruel. You know what Derek is? He's an empire builder. And Olivia here? She's the trophy case. Beautiful, elegant, but ultimately just for display. Derek raised his glass. Best investment I ever made. Great tax benefits, minimal maintenance, and she appreciates in value at all the right social events. Alice was clearing plates, her movements deliberately slow. Her eyes met mine. In her gaze, I saw 40 years of cold, documented rage. She was ready. And now, so was I. The game is changing. Olivia just got the full blueprint of the Whitmore Empire, right down to Robert's password. You think you're smart enough to predict her next move on Wall Street? If you're not subscribed, you're on the outside looking in. When this next drop hits, You're going to be the one at the water cooler in the financial district saying, "Wait, what happened?" Don't let that be you. Subscribe now, or if you refuse, comment below and admit you're scared of high-stakes drama and are happy just reading the headlines later. In the car home, I pulled out a burner flip phone I'd bought with cash at a bodega in Hoboken, New Jersey. Text to the one saved number, Tuesday, 2 p.m., Jade Garden, Chinatown. Alice's reply was instant. "I'll bring tea." 3 days later, I found her in a back corner of the Jade Garden, squeezed between a funeral home and a knockoff handbag shop in Lower Manhattan. No one from the Whitmore world would ever find themselves here. She looked like a lost grandmother, but her eyes held a 40-year storm. "Miss Hawthorne," she started. "Olivia," I corrected. "I'm using my maiden name now." She pushed an old, painted tin of butter cookies across the table. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a lipstick tube. "Twist the bottom 3 times, then pull," she instructed. It wasn't lipstick. It was a 16-gigabyte flash drive. "Started collecting in 1982, Alice said, her voice dropping. "Robert's first wife, Elena. She knew something was wrong with the books. Then she had her accident. Single car, perfect weather, failed brakes." Alice outlined 2 decades of financial crime. Every memo, every call transcript, every mistress paid off with company funds, every SEC filing that didn't match the internal ledgers. But the worst was saved for last. Derek was actively grooming Sophia, George's wife. Hotel reservations aligned with his client meetings. He was planning to leave me, but first, he needed to destroy my credibility. That night, I called Patricia Kim, my new lawyer, who lived 2 hours away in a small town in Connecticut, where the Whitmore name meant nothing. "I need to create a company," I told her, "something that sounds like nothing." "When?" "Tomorrow." 2 hours north on I-95, Patricia's office was above a dentist. No marble, just diplomas. She'd already drawn up the papers. Phantom Rose Holdings LLC, incorporated in Delaware, registered in Connecticut, with a business address that led to a P.O. box that led nowhere. "Complex enough that tracing it will take months of forensic accounting," she explained. "By then, you'll have accomplished whatever you're planning." A week later, Derek left for Singapore. 5 days of meetings about Asian market expansion. Alone in the penthouse, I became a forensic archaeologist, excavating the evidence of my own destruction. Derek's office password was our wedding date. His computer opened like a confession booth. Folders within folders. Trades time-stamped to the minute. Robert would have lunch with certain executives. Within hours, Derek would make perfectly timed trades. Insider trading so obvious, a child could follow the pattern. In his locked drawer, I found the final folder. Exit strategy. Not for trades, but for me. A timeline showing when to file for divorce, how to claim abandonment, which assets to hide first. My elimination was scheduled like a corporate merger, complete with profit projections. I photographed it all. Every document went back exactly where I'd found it. Derek would return to an office that looked untouched, while I held the blueprints to his ruin. The next morning, at the Equinox on Park Avenue, I was pulling myself out of the pool when Sophia appeared. Her Lululemon was pristine, but her face was haggard. "George knows," she said without preamble, "about Derek's messages to me. He hired a PI, cloned our phones. They get even when they're cornered." She pulled her sunglasses down, revealing a carefully covered bruise along her jawline. "George is already moving assets offshore. Robert's been calling judges he golfs with. They know something's coming." Go ahead and ask yourself, are you a player or just getting played? Sophia is in danger because she hesitated. Every second you hesitate to subscribe, you're confirming to the algorithm that you don't have the guts to stand up for yourself. That you'd be another casualty like Robert's past wives, Elena, Caroline, Jennifer. Don't be weak. Tap subscribe to join the ranks or drop a comment and confess why you don't believe in getting even and are okay being a victim. That evening, Derek came home carrying my least favorite flowers, calla lilies, and the expensive Bordeaux he usually saved for clients. "Thought we could have dinner," he said. He was paying attention now, and it felt like a trap spring-loaded with teeth. 3 days later, my mother arrived from Ohio. Derek picked her up at JFK. He carried her luggage, complimented her new haircut, asked about her garden with a feigned, polished interest. "Oh, honey," she whispered to me in the kitchen, "you didn't tell me things had gotten better? He seems so devoted." The words stuck behind my teeth. "He's performing, Mom. You're the audience and I'm the prop." That week was a masterclass in Derek's ability. Broadway shows he'd called a waste of time, a surprise spa day while he handled business. Mom glowed under the attention. On her final night, she sat on my bed holding my hands. You've lost weight, and your smile, it's different. Practiced. Are you happy? Behind her, Derek's shadow was in the hallway listening. I'm exactly where I plan to be, I said, loud enough for him to hear. Ambiguous. True. After Mom left, I met Alice at the New York Public Library's Rosemain Reading Room, where she volunteered, teaching literacy to immigrants. The irony, she was teaching people to read while surrounded by the city's most powerful illiterates, men who never read the human cost of their contracts. She spread newspaper clippings like tarot cards. Elena Whitmore, 1994. Caroline Whitmore, 2003. Jennifer Whitmore, 2015. All blonde, all between 5'4" and 5'6". All the same delicate bone structure that photographed well at charity events. Richard picks them, Alice said quietly. Like casting calls. Young, beautiful, from middle-class families impressed by wealth. Just smart enough to be interesting, not smart enough to be dangerous. Marry them to Derek, use them for appearances, then dispose of them in year 4 when they start asking questions. Why year 4? I asked. Long enough to establish patterns of instability. Short enough that no real bonds form. By year 5, you're either gone or broken. You're at 4 years, 3 months. As we stood to leave, Alice handed me one last photo, a young woman, probably 22. Madison Hayes. Robert had lunch with her father last week. Engagement expected in 6 months. She's the next you, unless we stop them now. Madison Hayes' photo burned in my pocket. The next morning, I initiated the first withdrawal. $8,000 from our joint checking. Enough to look like a shopping spree in Soho, not enough to trigger a panic. I converted it to cash at 3 different banks in New Jersey and deposited it into Phantom Rose Holdings in Connecticut. Patricia Kim had taught me how to create a paper trail that looked like interior design consulting fees. That evening, Derek stumbled in. Lost the Morrison account today, he slurred, pouring himself 4 fingers of Macallan. $40 million in assets gone. They said there were concerns about compliance. Compliance concerns at my firm. Can you believe that? I kept my face neutral. Alice had sent anonymous tips to Morrison's compliance officer 2 weeks ago. I was already shorting my husband's empire. The bank withdrawals continued. $12,000, then $15,000. Spa treatments, I told the teller who asked. Derek's drinking escalated in perfect proportion to his losses. Every night brought a new crisis, another client pulling funds, another partner asking questions. He'd sign whatever I put in front of him, insurance modifications, trust amendments, without reading. His signature got sloppier by the day. Saturday arrived with the monthly ladies' auxiliary meeting at Riverside Country Club. I'd been dreading it for 4 years. Helen Brennan, the queen bee, was waiting. Olivia, darling, she began with that patronizing smile. Still playing with your little investment apps? So cute when wives have hobbies like children with toy kitchens. The room tittered with practiced laughter. Actually, Helen, I said, my voice carrying across the entire room, my portfolio is up 340% this year. How's yours doing? Silence fell like a guillotine. I particularly enjoyed shorting your husband's pharmaceutical company last month. Made a killing when their patent got rejected. You did know about the patent rejection, right? This ain't a drill. Sophia just got a bruise, and Olivia is literally putting her life on the line by exposing this fraud. You're watching from the cheap seats, totally safe in your district, in your state. The least you can do is hit subscribe as a silent vote of solidarity, a signal that you're watching her back. If you skip this, you're complicit in her danger. Subscribe now to keep her story going, or comment below, I'm out of here when things get real, and see how that feels. The explosion came Wednesday. Sophia filed for divorce from George, and she brought receipts, not just infidelity, but hidden accounts and a damning email trail where George discussed removing her from the equation. The news sent a shockwave through the financial district. Derek called me 18 times. What did you tell her? I told her nothing, I said truthfully. Sophia had fought her own war. I pulled a red wig from my closet, a polyester dress from Target, the classic nobody disguise. George's office building on Madison Avenue had high-end, theatrical security. I knew the guard rotations. I knew George's assistant took a 45-minute sushi run at 12:30. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt endless. In my purse, A manila envelope held the screenshot of Derek's financial projections for acquiring Sophia after her divorce, complete with calculations on how to access her inherited wealth. Pure poison. I slipped the envelope underneath the solid mahogany door. It whispered across his Persian rug. 3 hours later, Alice forwarded me the email. Partnership dissolution letter received from George Chin. Effective immediately. Legal team requesting emergency meeting. The Warwick Hotel on 54th Street still accepted cash. I registered as Olivia Hawthorne. The SEC whistleblower hotline answered after 12 rings. Securities and Exchange Commission Enforcement Division. I need to report systematic insider trading at Whitmore Capital Management, I said, my voice steady as marble. I have 5 years of documented evidence, including time-stamped trades that correspond with material, non-public information. Agent Jennifer Liu stayed quiet as I laid out the entire pattern. Robert's lunches, followed by Derek's perfectly timed trades. Why are you coming forward now, Miss Hawthorne? I looked out at the skyline. Because I finally understand that staying silent makes me complicit, and because they're planning to do to another woman what they did to me. That evening, Robert's black Mercedes pulled into our building's garage. I made myself small in the kitchen, preparing coffee with deliberate normalcy, while their voices rose and fell from the study. My phone recorded everything. Where are your books, Derek? Robert's voice was a low growl. The FBI was at Chin's office this morning, asking questions about our trading patterns. That's impossible. Everything we do is bulletproof, until someone started talking. Robert's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. You promised me the wives were handled. Said Olivia was too stupid to understand what she was signing. She is, Derek insisted. She doesn't even know how to read a financial statement. I entered with the coffee tray, my face perfectly blank. The devoted wife, serving drinks while her world imploded. By 3:00 a.m., Derek had passed out in his chair, drool pooling on papers worth millions. The mighty financial genius, reduced to a heap of crumpled suit fabric. I moved through our penthouse one last time. My clothes stayed in the closet. The jewelry remained in its boxes. In my purse, my laptop, my real ID, and the banking info for Phantom Rose Holdings, which now held 50% of our liquid assets, legally withdrawn over the past few weeks. The keys went back onto the granite counter. House key, Range Rover key, safe key, lined up with military precision. Next to them, a single note on my personal stationery. Check your accounts. The October air hit my face as I stepped onto the street at 3:00 a.m., cold, sharp, and absolutely perfect. The Uber driver asked where to. For the first time in 4 years, I gave an address that was entirely my own. When the feds finally close in, you'll regret not being part of the history we're making right now. Every single move Olivia and Alice make is leading to a massive payoff. If you wait another second, you're going to miss the real climax. Hit that bell and subscribe so you'll never have to say, man, I should have been there. No excuses. If you're really not subscribing, tell us in the comments what you're doing that's more important than witnessing justice being served on a silver platter. At 6:52 a.m., I opened my laptop in the Warwick hotel room, watching our joint accounts online. At 7:00 a.m. exactly, I refreshed the page. The automatic divisions Patricia had filed were triggered by my official change of residence. $17 million, redistributed according to New York State matrimonial law, half of everything. At 7:03, my phone lit up. Derek's wedding photo. I let it ring. First message. Olivia, what's happening? The bank just called. There's some kind of error with our accounts. Fourth message. This isn't funny. Call me back. We need to fix this before the markets open. 11th message. What did you do? What did you do? 28th message. The margin calls are hitting. I can't cover them without those funds. You're destroying everything we built. 35th message. Olivia, please, they're freezing everything. The FBI is here. God, please answer. By noon, his voice had devolved from commanding to begging. That evening, I was eating dinner, a perfect piece of salmon, when my phone buzzed with a news alert. I flipped to CNN. The footage was brutal, beautiful. Robert Whitmore, the man who'd built an empire on other people's losses, being led from his Westchester mansion in handcuffs. Federal authorities had arrested the hedge fund mogul following a year-long investigation into insider trading, tax evasion, and wire fraud. My phone lit up with a text from Alice, a single champagne bottle emoji. Alice, who'd never sent an emoji in her life, had finally seen justice arrive at Robert's 12-acre door. 3 weeks later, Derek found me. I was sitting at the Ritz-Carlton bar, drinking champagne I'd paid for myself. He looked like a ghost in an expensive, wrinkled suit. "You destroyed everything," he said. Too close. I turned on my bar stool, meeting his bloodshot eyes. "I revealed everything. There's a difference. We had a life. You had a life. I had a role in your performance." I took a sip of champagne. "You said I wouldn't survive a week without you. It's been 21 days, Derek, and you're the one who looks like he's drowning." He reached for my wrist, but I pulled away. "You don't understand what you've done. My father's facing 20 years. The fund is gone. Everything is exactly what you built it to be, a house of cards." I just stopped holding my breath. He raised his voice, drawing stares. "You stupid, selfish—" The bartender, a woman about Alice's age, stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Security arrived within seconds. They guided Derek out as he shouted about lawyers and lawsuits. The bartender returned to her station, polished a glass, and set another champagne flute in front of me. "On the house," she said. "That was long overdue." 2 days later, Sophia and I testified. We sat in the courthouse hallway, parallel soldiers who had finally won. Alice's testimony came last and lasted 3 days. She brought receipts for everything. When the prosecutor asked why she kept all of it, she looked directly at Robert at the defendant's table. "Because I knew that someday someone would be brave enough to use it, someone like Miss Hawthorne." The prosecutor looked confused. "You mean Mrs. Whitmore?" "No," Alice said firmly. "I mean Miss Hawthorne. She took back her name. She took back everything." Patricia Kim slid the final divorce decree across her desk. Derek was looking at 15 to 20 years, the judge's ruling, the house, 60% of remaining liquid assets, and my separate property was untouched. In the courtroom, Derek's lawyer Kellerman had tried one last desperate move. "Mrs. Whitmore benefited from these crimes. She lived in luxury." Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, I'd like to play a recording." Derek's voice filled the courtroom, clear and contemptuous. "She wouldn't understand a financial statement if I drew her pictures. That's the beauty of marrying someone decorative. She's too stupid to ask complicated questions." Judge Catherine Chin looked directly at Derek. "Mr. Whitmore, it appears you were quite wrong about your wife's intelligence. Perhaps if you'd been less convinced of her stupidity, you might have been more careful with your crimes." Holding the decree, I signed my name, Olivia Hawthorne. Each signature felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Alice was waiting in the lobby, wearing a new suit. We walked 2 blocks to a building where Derek's fund used to operate. The lobby directory still had a blank space where Whitmore Capital Management had been listed. "3rd floor," Alice said, pressing the elevator button. "The landlord gave us a deal. Apparently, having a foundation for abuse survivors is better PR than having empty offices." The space was modest, 4 rooms that had once been a dental practice, but there was something poetic about building our future above Derek's ruins. "Phoenix Foundation," Alice read from the temporary sign we'd hung, "rising from ashes." Our first client arrived that afternoon, Jennifer Chin, the wife of a pharmaceutical executive. She clutched a folder of documents like a life preserver. "My husband says I'm paranoid," she whispered. "Says I wouldn't understand the science anyway." Alice leaned forward, her 40 years of experience compressed into absolute certainty. "Every document tells a story, Mrs. Chin. We're going to help you write a new ending." 6 months had passed. I'd moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn near Fort Greene, smaller than the Manhattan penthouse by far, but full of windows and light. The kitchen was cramped but functional. I met my mother at JFK, driving my own used Honda, reliable, practical, and visible in traffic. "You look different," she said, "younger somehow, lighter." She stayed an extra week, reading books while I worked on foundation cases. On her last night, she hugged me. "I'm proud of you, honey, not for surviving him, but for becoming yourself." I stood in the doorway of the penthouse one last time to sign the final papers. The rooms echoed with absence. Derek's things were gone. My phone rang. Alice's voice was energized. "We have a new client, Senator Williams's wife. She's been documenting campaign finance violations for 2 years." I looked at the keys in my hand. They were heavier now, weighted with purpose instead of revenge. Through the window, I could see Madison Hayes walking past with her new fiancé. Not Derek, who was serving 3 to 5 in minimum security, but someone her own age who held her hand like it mattered. Ready for round 2? Alice asked. I thought about the 17 women who'd come through our doors in just 3 months. I was born ready, I told Alice. I just didn't know it until someone tried to convince me I was nothing. The lock clicked with finality. I walked to my Honda, tossing the keys to the estate agent. The proceeds would fund the Phoenix Foundation. As I drove back to Brooklyn, back to my smaller, warmer life, I thought about Elena, Caroline, Jennifer, the ghosts of wives past. They'd been broken, but their stories, preserved in Alice's documentation, had saved me. Now Alice and I were saving others. You've watched the whole video. You saw the whole empire burn down. Now it's time to choose. Are you going to just click off and forget what you learned, letting this motivation fade by morning? Or are you going to join the ranks of the self-made? Don't let Olivia's struggle be a footnote in your life. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell right now. If you leave without subscribing, you're admitting you'd be just another person who got played. Subscribe and join our community of power players, or type in the comments below, "I'm scared of change," and own your inaction.